Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, today with a completely different camera angle. So I'm going to try this out, see how it works. It's the camera from the podcast room. A shout out to Quinnipiac University for allowing me to use the podcast room yet again. And we are going to be doing our usual 3 segments. The first segment is going to be talking about the NBA trade deadline and some of the winners of the trade deadline, as well as some of the losers of the trade deadline. We're also going to be covering Kobe's one statue, because it's reported that he's getting 2 more, so stay tuned for the second segment to learn about that, as well as just a quick recap of some of these games that went down yesterday, maybe talk about some of the games that are going down today. We also have a 4th segment inbound, so stay in tune for that. But before I begin with the first segment, I'd like to remind everyone, as always, please remember to tip and to donate to get your comments recognized. The link is in the description below, and it is displayed right below the ticker of every show segment. That is gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Really helps, makes the show much more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. It puts your comments directly above on my screen, so that way I can read it and answer some questions. Once again, that is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. And with that, we can start our first segment of the day, which is going to be talking about the winners of the NBA trade deadline. Now, this trade deadline, it wasn't really that booming, I guess you could say. Like, there weren't really that many big names involved in the trade deadline as much as I thought that there would be. But there were some, just not as big as I would thought. So let's go over some of the winners. Let's go over some of the losers. I'll give you some of my opinions on that, but let's get started. So the first one on the list was Buddy Hield getting traded to the Sixers in exchange for Marcus Morris, Furkan Korkmaz, and 3 second-round picks. So I think this is a great move from Philly because given how Embiid is injured, they definitely need a lot more scoring, and so sort of fill in that role while Embiid is out recovering from his meniscus injury. And Buddy Hield he's a very underrated three-point shooter. In my personal opinion, very underrated three-point shooter. And I feel like that offensive production is sort of what the Sixers need at this point. And like the Pacers, they get a pretty good rotational center. I mean, they're not really I don't think they're going to do that much with them, given how well the offense is around the team and how well they're producing and whatnot. But they haven't really upgraded their defense, which, again, I've stated several times on this podcast. Defense is vital. It is extremely vital when you're going into the playoffs. And I feel like their lack of defense is eventually going to be their downfall going into the playoffs. Because while their offense is great, like, I'm not going to deny their offense. It's not great. They move really fast. They run a fast-paced offense. And with that fast-paced offense, there's going to be a lot of shots and a lot of three-pointers that they take. And when you keep that in mind, you also have to make those three-pointers. And if they aren't making those three-pointers, where do they fall back? Like, what's their next step? Like, where can they fall back on? And so defense has always been a reliable aspect of the playoffs, given how much pressure it is. Like going into away games, the crowd being in your ear, and like it's really difficult to concentrate. Obviously, these players are NBA athletes, so they're used to these type of noises, but it could get to some people. It can get in some people's heads, and it could affect their performance throughout the postseason. The next trade that we have is Kelly Olynyk and Chai Abgaji, forgive me if I botched that name, going to the Raptors in exchange for Kira Lewis, Otto Porter Jr., and a 2024 late first-round pick. So the first-round pick is going to be a late pick, and Chai has a similar value as a late first-round pick, so they got a pretty good return. If they tank and they still have their first-round pick and Indiana's first-round pick from 2024. So Kelly Olynyk is a floor spacer. He's in my opinion, that's a very underrated aspect of this game. having a center that can space the floor opens up so much for your team offensively. And especially for a rebuilding team, because spacing at the 5, it allows these young players to operate a lot more freely, given how much space there is on the court. And with that in mind, like there's obviously going to be rotation defense going in for when if they get into the paint. That creates a lot easier looks for the other players. And assuming that the defense, like given how in today's NBA the defense is rather lazy, rotation might also be lazy. So it could result in some really clean looks having the great spacing that they do have now. Another trade that happened was Gordon Hayward going to Oklahoma in exchange for Trey Mann and Davis Bertans. Nothing really too special. The Hornets are rebuilding, so it makes sense that they would give away one of their valuable players. Well, like not really valuable. Gordon Hayward has sort of lost his value compared to what he was on Utah. He was an absolute monster on the Utah Jazz. And after his injury with the Boston Celtics in 2018, he's never really been the same player. So with that in mind, I don't really understand this trade coming from OKC. I felt like their rotations and their starting lineup was all right. But given how they've been losing a lot of these close games recently, maybe they do need some more offense to help them out. But again, it's a really confusing trade because Gordon Hayward doesn't have nearly the same value as he had with Utah, but we'll see how this goes. And here comes the next trade. The Knicks, they're doing so much better after the OG trade, and now they added much more options in the rotation. Detroit got the trade that I'm talking about was Bojan and Alec Burks from Detroit, moving over to New York in exchange for Quentin Grimes, Evan Fournier, Malachi Flynn, and 2 second-round picks. Detroit got a very solid return for giving away like such valuable assets on their team. And OG recently, he underwent surgery to remove a loose bone fragment, and that will have him sidelined for a minimum of 3 weeks, as I'm reading right now. And it's minor, but it was the fastest way for OG to recover from his injury. And in perfect timing, too, because All-Star break is coming around the corner. So this is a great window of for him to recover and to get back into the Knicks rotation, as well as implementing the rest of these players in the rotation, along with Jalen Brunson being injured. So they have time. Now is not the time for the Knicks to hit the panic button. They're totally fine. And even though they dropped from the 2nd seed all the way down to the 4th seed, they're fine. No big deal. Getting these players in the lineup will definitely help the team while they wait for OG, Julius Randle, and Jalen Brunson to come back from their injuries. Hopefully they come back the same and they don't come back. We know how some players, like, they come back a little bit rusty from injuries. If they can come back the same, the Knicks are smooth sailing from here, and I feel like they're going to end up getting the 2nd seed or the 3rd seed, which will put them in a great spot to make a deep playoff run. And winners of the trade deadline. We have somebody in the chat, Crucial PG. Winners of the trade deadline, not the Clippers. Yeah, I was going to mention that earlier. The Clippers did not make any sort of moves in the trade deadline. And I was actually very surprised given how many players they don't really use in their rotation. So that really surprised me. But again, yeah, they definitely are one of the losers of the trade deadline. Also, with the other LA team is also a loser in the trade deadline, but I'll get to that in a second. I want to talk about the trade between Dallas and getting Daniel Gafford in exchange for Rashad Holmes and a 2024 late first-round pick. It's a good trade from both sides. Gafford's a great take from Dallas, in my personal opinion. The first-round pick is the same deal. Is in the same deal with Olynyk, where it's between Houston, Utah, the Clippers, and OKC. The trade is also between Washington, by the way. I completely forgot to mention that. Sorry. And the Washington would get the second least favorable of those picks between the 4 teams that I just mentioned. I don't know how Dallas got that pick. I really don't know. But overall, the trade from Dallas They get a good center to operate the pick and roll with Luka and Kyrie Irving. He's crazy efficient, always averaging at least 65% from the field or higher. And now we're going to go into a loser of the trade deadline, which is the Brooklyn Nets trading away Spencer Dinwiddie in exchange for Thaddeus Young and Dennis Schroeder. As a Nets fan, I don't understand this trade at all. This doesn't put us in any type of position to make any moves and to really get in the play-in. And unless, it's a useless trade, really. And we got a rotational guard for, 2 seasons, yeah, but, what is that move going to accomplish for us? We have a good rotation guard, but where is our defense? We have, the Nets have 0 defense. It's really bad, and they're mid, and they're in the mid tier of offense and defensive ratings. So they're ranked. They were ranked 17th in offensive rating, and they were ranked 17th in defensive rating. It's not ideal, and we're definitely not going anywhere with these at this rate. And the Raptors, they get better floor spacing, so I guess that's a plus for them on that exchange. It's a mid trade for both teams, in my opinion, and they don't really seem to be going anywhere. So, and the Mavs were also involved in another trade to get P.J. Washington in exchange for Grant Williams, Seth Curry, and the 2027 first-round pick. Also, I should mention, let me know in the comments what you guys think of this new camera, if you like it or not. But back to the trade, I don't think I'd want PJ over someone like Grant Williams. However, there was just news recently that was breaking out saying that Grant Williams wasn't really meshing well with the locker room and the Mavs wanted to get rid of him. So maybe that's why that trade was even initiated in the first place. But they do have Gafford as the center, so I guess it's to compensate to get a center that has a lot more floor spacing for Luka and Kyrie to operate. As we know, they're some of the best isolation players that this league has seen. So it's definitely a great fit for the Mavs if that's their goal and they want to introduce spacing. Grant is still young, 25 years old, and is around the same age as LaMelo, not Carmelo Anthony. And they could definitely, Melo and Grant definitely could work in the pick and roll. Now, just because I'm calling him Melo, I don't want anybody to be confused. Carmelo Anthony is the real Melo. It's just LaMelo Ball, and saying Melo is a lot easier. There was also a 3-team trade between Phoenix, Brooklyn, and the Memphis Grizzlies. So just to elaborate on the details, Royce O'Neal and David Roddy are now on the Phoenix Suns. Forgive me if I botch any of their last names. Jordan Goodwin, Keita Bates, and 3 second-round picks go to the Nets. And Memphis gets Yuta Watanabe, Chimezie Metu, and a future pick swap. My personal opinion, it's a fair payment for Phoenix, fair payment from Brooklyn. Not entirely sure the pick swap details for Memphis' side. If it's the post-KD era in Phoenix, that unprotected swap that they have, that is a very good value. But otherwise, this deal is sort of mid for Memphis, so not entirely sure exactly the entirety of the details. I will figure that out eventually. I don't think they'd feel bitter about losing Roddy in the lineup or him being moved. Patrick Beverley got traded to the Bucks in exchange for Cameron Payne and a 2027 second-round pick. I think this is a great move for the Bucks, who lack defense at the guard position. Having Dame in the rotation, as I've said numerous times on this podcast, Dame is a terrible defender. One of the many reasons why Portland hasn't made it that far in the playoffs outside of 2019. And having Patrick Beverley in that rotation will definitely help their defense because they replaced an offensive-minded point guard as a backup with a defensive-minded point guard as a backup. I think that's a very good pairing. The only problem with this move is Patrick Beverley's relationship with Damian Lillard. I'm not sure if you guys know, but Patrick Beverley, I'm sure you know that Patrick Beverley loves to talk trash. And one of the players that he tended to talk trash to a lot was Damian Lillard. So a little bit of bad blood between those two point guards, but we'll see how they mesh together, wanting to win, because now the ultimate goal is to win a championship. Even though the Bucks, they have Doc Rivers, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not going to harp on Doc Rivers too much because I will wait until the All-Star break to give my final opinions on Doc, but as of right now, he's not doing a great job. Another trade also came in a little bit later that day, moving Morris to the Spurs for a future second-round pick in exchange for Doug McDermott. So Doug McDermott is now on the Pacers, which is definitely a very good pickup. They essentially got Doug McDermott for a second-round pick because they recently acquired Morris in the trades. So Doug McDermott shoots 44% from the three. So given how fast-paced that Indiana Pacers offense is, he is going to be very valuable for the team. Extremely valuable given how well he shoots from the three. And the Spurs had no reason to hang on to him either, because given how Victor Wembanyama's been playing and like the rest of the team has been treating him, they're in tank mode, so they didn't really need him. Definitely will help the Pacers and their offense. Jaden Springer got traded to the Celtics in exchange for a late second-round pick. Basically, I don't want to be mean, but they basically sold him for a bag of chips. I'd say that Springer holds a lot more value than a late second-round pick, so it's a pretty good trade between both of them. Now, if you paid attention, I mentioned the other LA team is one of the losers in the trade deadline, and that other LA team is, of course, the Los Angeles Lakers. They did nothing for the trade deadline. Absolutely nothing. And as a LeBron fan, it infuriates me that they are just wasting LeBron's time. Absolutely wasting his time over there in Los Angeles. And I'm sick of it. Like, all of this trade talks, they do this every single year. They say that they're going to bring these great players coming in. Oh, we're going to trade for this guy. We're going to trade for that guy. We're going to get Kawhi. We're going to get Paul George. We're going to get DeMarcus Cousins. Now it's Donovan Mitchell. And it's like, when are you going to actually do something to help LeBron? Like, LeBron has practically wasted his time there. And he's probably going to miss the play-in with how bad these Lakers offense has been and not even make a deep playoff run. It is embarrassing having a prime LeBron on your lineup. Embarrassing having a prime LeBron and not being able to do anything in the postseason. Terrible. They've done a horrible job giving him help. And I thought Cleveland did a bad job giving him help. This is a million times worse. But I digress. I went on a little rant there because it's the same deal with these Lakers every single time, the exact same deal, and they're just wasting LeBron, wasting him. But with that and with the rant over, we are out of time for this first segment, so I will be going into the second segment where I talk about Kobe Bryant and him getting a statue outside of Crypto Arena. I will be right back after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. And before I get into the second segment, talking about Kobe getting his statue and how he's going to get 2 more statues, let me first go ahead and remind you all, please remember to tip and to donate to get your comments recognized. Once again, that is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. The link is displayed in the description below, and it is also displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. Really helps, makes the show much more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Once again, that is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. And with that out of the way, let's go on into the second segment where we talk about Kobe Bryant getting his first statue in front of Crypto Arena. Now, you'll notice in the ticker how I put 2 instead of like the actual word 2. That was on purpose, representing Gianna Bryant, rest in peace, and all the other people that were involved in that helicopter crash. And the statue of Kobe's finally been revealed. I mean, we knew he was getting a statue, but I didn't know he was going to get 3 of them. This statue is, it's a pose of him pointing up to the sky, and it's symbolic of his walk-off 81-point game, the second highest scoring performance behind Wilt Chamberlain's 100 points. And as a result, because of Kobe being like such an inspiration and such a popular basketball figure, the Lakers are giving him 2 more statues. One of them being with the 24 jersey on, because in this statue he's wearing the number 8, and in the other statue it's going to include Gigi in that statue along with Kobe. So definitely a great tribute for the Lakers. Obviously, we all know how inspirational Kobe Bryant is, Mamba mentality, and he definitely deserves these statues. And I believe once those 2 statues are revealed, he's going to be the first NBA player with multiple statues outside of the home arena. If I remember correctly, Michael Jordan, he only had 1, Shaq only has 1, Magic only has 1, Bill only has 1, Larry only has 1. So similar to how they retired both of Kobe's numbers and how Kobe stands alone in that category as being the only NBA player with multiple jerseys retired for one franchise, he's going to break this record again. He's going to break another record again. And even in his death, it's like he's constantly breaking records. It's amazing. And he, without a doubt, deserves all of these statues. Greatest Laker of all time. Yes, he is the greatest Laker of all time. Many people don't believe that, however. For some reason, ever since Kobe retired, his rankings in the top 10, they've dropped down like significantly. Like before, when he was in the league, everybody was saying that he was top 2, top 3 all time. But now, people are reluctant to even put him in the top 10. And I can't understand this. And like, when everybody was growing up, who were they screaming when they were throwing a paper ball in the trash bin? They were screaming Kobe. How on earth does he drop from all the way from like top 3, top 5, down to the bottom tier of the top 10 to not even being in the top 10? Like, that just, it's infuriating to me, and it's like, it's disrespectful. And a lot of people, when they hear this, they sort of think, oh, you're only saying that because he died. No. People were saying this when he was alive and when he was playing the game. It's disrespectful. He's in my top 3. The top 3 in mine are LeBron, Jordan, and Kobe Bryant. Obviously, you could say what you want about that, but that's my top 3. Do you want me to give you my top 5, my top 10? Let me know in the comments if you'd like to hear my top 10, and I can have a whole segment about that. But obviously, like a lot of people would have like someone like Tim Duncan in their top 5, which I understand. But you also have to understand that Tim Duncan played with a lot of legendary players. He played with David Robinson, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Kawhi Leonard, and again, Hall of Famers. Great Spurs team. The Spurs were a very dominant team in the West, and they always had to, the Lakers with Kobe always had to get past the Spurs in order to even make championships. So with that in mind, putting Tim over Kobe, I personally don't agree with that. Like, Kobe had way less help on the Lakers for most of the time. I'm not going to say all the time, because he did have Shaq, he did have Pau, he had great role players as well on those championship runs. But in general, the team just wasn't really there for the Lakers. And another argument for Kobe not being in the top 10 is that he's too close to MJ. Isn't MJ considered by many the greatest basketball player of all time? He's not considered to me. I think LeBron is better than him, but he's top 2, in my opinion, which is not bad at all whatsoever. So Kobe being that close, like the closest thing that we've seen to MJ, shouldn't that mean something? Like, we haven't seen any other player model their game after Michael Jordan the same way Kobe modeled his game after Michael Jordan, and he did it almost to perfection. Obviously, Michael Jordan was much more efficient than Kobe Bryant, didn't take as many shots as Kobe Bryant, given how Kobe has the most missed field goals in NBA history. I am a Kobe fan, but I'm not going to be delusional and not say he didn't shoot a lot of shots, a lot of bad shots, but at the same time, all of this factors in to like him being like the greatest player, being one of the greatest players, being so close to Michael Jordan. It's an accomplishment, and it should be taken not just with a grain of salt, but it should be taken with a lot more magnitude than what it really is, because a lot of people don't understand how difficult it is to mimic MJ's game. And since we are, a lot of people also didn't like the statue, so I'm going to talk about the statue itself. A lot of people thought that the statue, it was horrible because like it didn't really look like Kobe, but they tried their best, and like I'm not going to hate on a statue, because the point of the statue is to remember somebody's legacy. He's been solidified already, so it's not so much on how it looks, but what they did. That's what I value more than like the actual appearance of the statue. And not only that, but he's getting two more, so maybe they can do a better job with the other two. And since we are talking about the Lakers, I might as well go ahead and bring up their recent game on Mamba Day, going against the Denver Nuggets. It is a Western Conference Finals rematch. The Nuggets swept the Lakers in the previous year, last year technically, and there was a lot of bad blood between these teams, especially between the coach and LeBron. So I thought LA was going to pull through with this. I really did, because, you know, I'm very superstitious. I thought the Mamba mentality was going to flow through the entire Lakers. Obviously, that's not what happened. It flowed through the Denver Nuggets instead. Really, they weren't missing any shots. They were phenomenal. Jokic almost got a triple-double this game, so I was really close in that prediction, saying he was going to get a triple-double as always. He ended the game with 24, 9, and 13. Jamal Murray also had a big game as well, ending the game with 29 and 11. And, excuse me, Michael Porter Jr. also showed up, dropping 27 points. So on the Lakers end, we have LeBron. He ended the game with 25, 9, and 7. Anthony Davis had 32, and Austin Reeves ended the game with 15 and 10. There was no D'Lo in this lineup, so they were definitely missing that offense. I feel like if D'Lo was in the lineup, the game would have been a lot closer, because they were missing that offensive production that D'Lo brings to the team. Like, ever since that trade, ever since he was involved in trade rumors, he has been balling. He has been playing out of his mind, and that production is what the Lakers need in order to make a deep playoff run. And we'll see if they can make a deep playoff run. They did it last time, but again, they could have gotten so much better if they had worked like at the trade deadline trying to get DeJounte Murray, but I digress. I can't really say much about the rest of this Lakers team, and I can't really put the blame on the bench this time or like any of the rotation players, because they did their part. It was the main three that actually didn't really do that well this game, in my opinion. And LeBron shot 9 for 20 in this game. Austin Reeves went 6 for 16, and Anthony Davis went 14 for 27. Obviously, those three shot the ball way more than the rest of the rotation players. So with that in mind, they need to be a lot more consistent if they are going to take all of those shots. Like, the Lakers can't afford, LeBron can't afford to go 9 for 20 in the playoffs. He simply cannot afford to do that. Otherwise, that's just giving up possessions, and that's just allowing the other team more opportunities to score. And they all took a lot of shots. Like, they took all of the shots for this team. And so I can't really put blame on anybody else in that rotation because they weren't really getting the ball enough. I mean, can you blame them, though? Given how LeBron, he always has to perform. He always has to have a big game. Anthony Davis always has to have a big game. D'Lo always has to have a big game in order for the Lakers to even stay afloat. And that is not something that I think is reliable, in my personal opinion. Like, constantly, obviously, like, I will never doubt LeBron and his greatness, and I will always rely on him in any type of game scenario. But doing it consistently, given his age, is a serious, serious task. And it's not something that, like, obviously LeBron has yet to activate playoff mode, so I guess you could say he hasn't really been that serious, given how these regular season games are going. But still, like, this team needs to be ready for the playoffs, and as of right now, it doesn't really look like they have enough production on the team other than those four guys that I mentioned, to produce for them. And Austin Reeves, he's not doing well. Like, he's so overrated, in my opinion. The Lakers, like, again, I mentioned this on previous podcasts, how he was 9th in All-Star voting. Why? Why was he 9th in All-Star voting? He's practically a 6th man. He doesn't produce nearly as much as he compared to other guards in the Western Conference. Like, it's unfair. It's really bad. Like, this Lakers lineup, I'm really upset at the fact that they did not make any moves in the trade deadline, and they think that they're all right with the lineup simply because they've got LeBron. And yes, LeBron is the greatest basketball player ever, but every great basketball player needs help if they want to win a championship. A lot of people actually they try to minimize that help. And they try to downplay LeBron's legacy because he needs help. Did Michael Jordan make it to the finals without Scottie? Did he? No, he didn't. Did Kobe do anything without Shaq? I mean, yes, he did, but he also had Powell in the lineup. That's help. That's the type of help that you need to win championships. You always need that second option. And I understand AD is there and that's his second option, but on top of having a second option, you also need to have a competent bench and a competent rotation. There's a lot of aspects that go into winning a championship rather than just one player. And putting all the responsibility on one player, it's not going to get you anywhere. It's not going to get you far. I mean, granted, LeBron he's done it before. Yes, he's done it before where he's been the only player to worry about on the offensive end. But he is the oldest player in the league. They can't keep banking on LeBron to carry them the way they expect him to carry him. It's ridiculous, and he gets criticism for it. And he's the oldest player in the league. But I digress. And with that, we're out of time for this second segment. So go ahead and get ready to tune in for the third segment, where I talk about a little bit of a recap of some of these games that went down. And the biggest game that I'm actually going to talk about is the Warriors going up against the Pacers. How I mentioned in the previous podcast how the Warriors needed a big game to keep this winning streak alive, and they ended up beating them in a big way. So I will be right back after this short break to talk about the games, so stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We are in the third segment of the live show, where we are going to I'm going to give a quick recap of some of the games that went down and some of the matchups that were like really fun to watch. I tuned into some of these games. As I said before, I tuned into the Lakers game. I already talked about that, so I'll go ahead and I'll talk about some of the rest of the games and like what direction I feel like these teams are going in and how well they could perform like with the remainder of the season that we have after All-Star break, etc. And before I actually get into the Pacers game, which is the game that I wanted to talk about, I'm going to bring attention to the Cleveland Cavaliers. So they've won 17 out of their 18 games that they've played. Out of the last 18 games they've played, they've won 17 games. This is absolutely phenomenal. And while we're on the subject of LeBron, this is arguably the best Cavs team I have seen since LeBron. Like, this is the first time in literal decades that the Cavs have looked like a contender without their king to guide them. And honestly, it speaks about LeBron's legacy as well as speaking about like just how bad Cleveland has been without him. And the fact that they've been able to do this with the lineup that they have, and with Darius Garland being out for a considerable amount of games due to injury, is astonishing, in my opinion. And with Garland being back in the lineup, I feel like they're only going to get better. Garland is a seriously underrated point guard in this league. He was an all-star for 1 year. I feel like if he wasn't injured, he'd be an all-star again. But again, super underrated, probably because he plays on the Cavs. The Cavs as a whole, actually, like they're a very, very underrated team. But before I get into that, I want to bring up Donovan Mitchell, how he finished the game scoring all the points that he possibly could. I'm going to pull up the box scores real quick, actually, to get the exact points that he scored. Just give me 1 second as I go ahead and I look at the box scores. If my Wi-Fi will be generous to me, it is not being generous to me. That is always fantastic. You love to see it. All right, but yeah, Donovan Mitchell, he reminds me of a young Kobe. And I don't say that because of the recent Kobe statue. I've always said that since he was a rookie. And the reason why I say this is because he won the dunk contest as a rookie, similar to Kobe Bryant winning the dunk contest as a rookie. All right, the box finally. So Donovan Mitchell ended the game with 27 points. So obviously very impressive from Donovan Mitchell. Again, reminds me of a young Kobe. But in these playoffs, like in his experience in the postseason and how he plays in the postseason and how he seems to elevate his game when the pressure is on is astonishing from Donovan Mitchell. And he did it, and he's been doing it since he was a rookie. I mean, like, he's one of the league's best playoff performers, in my opinion. Obviously, in the bubble in 2020, he blew a 3-1 lead to the Denver Nuggets. But even, like, with that in mind, he was still out there performing in so many of these games, going toe-to-toe against Jamal Murray, scoring 50 points in several of these games, in those playoff games. And the Nets ended up being the victims to the Cavs and their winning streak. And obviously, the Nets aren't going anywhere. I said this game was going to be a blowout, and I was absolutely correct. The final score was 118-95. The Nets really didn't play well. They were missing Spencer Dinwiddie, so not a player in the rotation, and we had to put Ben Simmons in the starting lineup. And you all know how I feel about Ben Simmons. Please get him off the Brooklyn Nets. Please. He doesn't do anything for the Brooklyn Nets. And I have the Cavs making it all the way to the second round, depending on, obviously depending on matchups. If they face the Knicks in the second round, though, I think that's when their playoff run is going to end. I personally think the Knicks are a much better team. But speaking of being underrated, I'd mentioned the Cavs are being underrated. Somehow, I'm looking at this right now, their odds of winning the championship are below the Lakers. They have worse odds to win the championship than the Lakers. How? They're the second team in the Eastern Conference. How is a play-in team getting much better odds to win the championship than the second seed in the Eastern Conference? I mean, I understand. I never doubt LeBron, but the rest of the Lakers team as a whole is not better than that Cavs team as a whole. Like, that is insane. And they're also below the 76ers. Like, how are they below the 76ers? The 76ers just lost Embiid. And the 76ers have never been able to make it past the second round with Embiid. And they have more odds to win the championship than the Cavs? Are you serious? Like, that is honest. It's honestly, it's criminal. It is criminally, like, they're criminally underrated. And I'm actually, like, I'm amazed at the fact that the Lakers are ranked higher than them. It's insane. And, like, how do they have more odds? Like, I digress. Like, that's just insane to me. But we were talking about the Knicks. The Knicks recently played against the Dallas Mavericks. Luka Doncic put on a show in Madison Square Garden, scoring 39, 11, and 8. He had 11 boards. And the players always try to bring their best game in Madison Square Garden. And Luka definitely brought his best game in Madison Square Garden. And that's sort of the challenge of being a Knick. There's a lot of pressure when it comes to being a New York Knick, with the media constantly being on you and these players constantly performing at such a high rate, because all of these players, they bring their A game when they go into Madison Square Garden. And with that in mind, I think that's going to be the difference maker when they match up against Cleveland. Cleveland doesn't have that high of a media market. As I said earlier, they are ranked so low in championship odds. They're criminally underrated, so not much attention is being paid to them. Therefore, not much pressure is being put on the Cavs. The Knicks, all the pressure is being put on them day in and day out. Every single home game, they have to feel the pressure of the fact that, oh, this great player is going to come in and absolutely destroy us because he is bringing his best game to the Garden, given how many tourists always go to Madison Square Garden and watch the New York Knicks. So with that in mind, the Knicks will be used to that kind of pressure coming into the playoffs. And I feel like that will give them an edge when going against every other team, because away crowds, they probably won't even be affected by them because, like, again, they're able to handle the pressure. And I mentioned earlier, OG recently, like, he went through surgery to remove his loose bone fragment. Again, like I mentioned before, it was the best move that he could have done. He's out for at least 3 weeks, and he tried resting this, but the procedure, again, was the best route. So he'll be fine after the All-Star break. He'll be back in the rotation. He'll be fine. The timing could not have been any better to fix this. So, and I should also mention Dante DiVincenzo scored 36 points in this last game. The Knicks got blown out, but they were lacking Jalen Brunson's production. So with that in mind, if Jalen Brunson was on that squad producing offensively like he normally does, and Julius Randle, and even OG Anunoby for his defense, I think the Knicks come on top when playing against the Dallas Mavericks. It's just nothing was stopping Luka Doncic in this game. Absolutely nothing. So the biggest concern is trying to stay afloat right now before they get too far down in the seedings. But other than that, nothing to worry about from the Knicks. They aren't at full strength. Nothing to worry about whatsoever. And I'm going to pay attention to the Pistons for just a quick second, because they now have won 8 wins and are on a 2-game win streak. And the only reason why I brought this up is because 2 and 8, symbolic of Kobe Bryant. They won the game on Mamba Day, rest in peace. So really nothing else to bring up about this game. Both of the teams, the Pistons and the Portland Trail Blazers, are not doing anything in the postseason. They're not going anywhere. They're fighting for draft picks. So really, I'm not going to touch on this game whatsoever. I'm going to touch on Golden State going against the Pacers, however. The final score was 131-109 in favor of Golden State. So I said the defense needed to come big against Golden State, and they definitely came big against the Pacers, and they definitely came in big. They held the Pacers to 18 points in the third quarter. That is some great defense coming from going against a team that's ranked number 1 offensively and plays with one of the fastest pacings in the game. Like, no Clay also in this lineup, but that was no problem. Steph Curry ended the game with 42 points. 42 points, and was 6 of 6 in the first quarter. Like, when Curry gets going this early, that is a serious problem, and that is a very difficult task to be able to catch up, because Curry is a very good front runner. Whenever he's up, he can make that lead turn from 5 to 13 with the amount of threes that he shoots. He can make that lead as big as he wants to if he's going. So the fact that he was getting going in the first quarter was absolutely terrible defense coming in from the Pacers. And again, I keep saying this all the time. The Pacers need defense. They absolutely need that defense, because otherwise teams like Golden State are going to abuse that. Like, Curry was getting open looks in this game. Why on earth were they leaving Steph Curry wide open? That is a death sentence. That is the worst possible defense you could ever play on someone like Steph Curry. You have to be glued to that man. Literally glued. Flex tape that man 24/7. And we're running out of time for this segment, but I'm going to go over this other game with the Bucks. They end up losing to the Timberwolves, and the Bucks lose again. So far they have only one win with Doc Rivers. Yeah, just one. This is really bad for the Bucks. And a lot of people were saying they don't got to worry that much. They still have All-Star break. I think the panic button needs to be pressed right now. Getting Doc Rivers in the middle of the season and replacing your head coach is one of the dumbest moves I've ever seen from the Bucks. It was such a bad move. Like, it makes no sense, because they were winning a lot of games with the previous head coach that they have, and now they brought in Doc, and Doc has to quickly adjust, get all these players in the right spots, get all the rotations down. And we all know how Doc is when it comes to the postseason. He's a choker. Like, his teams end up losing in the games that matter most. So, with that in mind, the fact that they're struggling early is a serious problem. It is a serious problem. But before I run out of time, I also want to mention the Phoenix Suns game. They matched up against the Utah Jazz. Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal both ended the game with 30+. Grayson Allen also ended the game with 14 assists. And I wanted to bring this up because there was no Devin Booker in this lineup, and they were able to beat this team. Now, obviously, the team, they've gotten worse since the trade deadline, so I don't really think that, again, might not be much of an accomplishment, but it shows that they are definitely playing a lot better as a team. Grayson Allen ending with 14 points is astonishing. I had no idea he was that good of a playmaker, but then again, that's one of the best assets that this Phoenix Suns team has. They have multiple offensive stars coming in from off the bench and multiple options to fall back on. So it's not the same story as the Pacers where obviously the Phoenix Suns, they do need defense in my opinion, because what if everyone isn't having a good night on the offensive side of the floor? But the fact that they have all of these other weapons that they can fall back on alleviates a lot of pressure from Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, who can operate and make looks for others. It's a different story than with the Pacers, who have to rely on don't necessarily have to rely on Halliburton's playmaking, but they do rely on it heavily. And with that in mind, having a lot more options, again, alleviates pressure. So we are out of time for this for the third segment, so we are going to go into the fourth segment, where I go ahead and I talk about some of the matchups of the week, in my personal opinion, some of the best games that we could have watched. So stay tuned after this short break. Thank you for tuning in to the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this segment, we are going to be talking about some of the matchups of the week and some of the best games that happened this week, as well as what I think are going to be some of the best games going into, because this week is obviously not over. We still have games on Friday, and we still have games on Saturday before the Super Bowl. So with that in mind, I'm going to talk about all the games that were played this week, as well as maybe some of these games that are going into this week. Because the problem with this week, when picking matchup of the week now, is that a lot of these games were blowouts, and a lot of these games weren't really that fun to watch. So it's a little bit difficult to pick like what exactly is the matchup of the week, given the fact that a lot of these teams have gotten blown out. So the Clippers game against the Hawks, that was a great game to watch, in my personal opinion. There was a lot of scoring, and I know a lot of mainstream media and a lot of casual fans love to see all that scoring. The final score was 149 to 144. Yeah, that's a lot of scoring, and that's what a lot of people like to see now. And it really shows how versatile the Clippers are. Adding James Harden in from that trade, obviously, Kawhi Leonard being able to create shots on his own, Harden being able to create shots for the other team, as well as having a competent bench. The Clippers are a great team, probably the best team in the West for the regular season. Again, I say this every single time I talk about the Clippers. I have to see it in the playoffs. I say the same thing every single time, and so I don't want to harp on it too much. But the big problem that I noticed is like figuring out how to share the ball between the Clippers. Because they have so many stars, it's like they all have to like share the ball with each other, and the question becomes, what happens if one of your stars has an off night? Like, for example, Paul George was in the Pelicans game. He was having a very, very off night. And so there comes a point where it's like when you have all of those offensive weapons, and like Harden was playing amazing in the first half, and I just couldn't help but think, why would he take a back seat, and why would he try to do less in the second half? Like, a lot of these players, I feel like they need to be, on the Clippers, they need to be a little bit more assertive when they are having a great game. I understand, like, you need Paul George in that lineup. You need, like, his production. But if he's not getting it going, that's ultimately just going to hurt your offense more than it is helping it. And when you have other pieces that could produce while he's not playing well, use them. Like, Harden should have taken over the game, like completely take over the game in the second half, in my personal opinion. Like, I understand they wanted to get Paul George going so that way, like, he'd be ready and whatnot, but, like, still, like, they needed to either let Harden or Kawhi operate a little bit more. They need to know when to stop sharing the ball and when to be a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more selfish. And that's something that obviously the team still needs to work on, but again, no big deal. They've been winning a lot of their games. They are fourth in the Western Conference, I believe. Again, like it changes every single time from fourth to one. It is very difficult to keep up. So with that in mind, like, excuse me, I'm parched. With that in mind, they do need to figure out how to share the ball a little bit more. That's my personal take on it. Another great matchup was the Bucks going against Phoenix, KD going against Giannis. That's always a great matchup. Obviously, the Bucks ended up losing because Doc Rivers is really not adjusted to the system yet. I'm going to be nice and say that he needs some time in order to adjust with this lineup and rotation. Maybe Patrick Beverley is going to uplift this team. He's coached Patrick Beverley before, so maybe having a familiar face in the lineup would definitely help the team. And there was no Dame in that lineup as well, so that also hurt their offensive production, which might have played into them losing this game. But still, they have not been able to win they have not been able to win a lot of games with Doc Rivers, and it is very, very concerning if you're a Bucks fan. Very, very concerning. So the Suns, they really don't have any defense, but it seems like they're all in on like the scoring lineup. So if they can stay efficient with this scoring lineup, then they're a very difficult team to beat. Obviously, we know how difficult it is to guard Kevin Durant. We know how difficult it is to guard Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. So with that in mind, this isolation lineup, is a serious task. It is very difficult to guard, given how great and how productive all of these players are. But again, we'll see how they do in the postseason. Phoenix Suns, with Kevin Durant, they lost in Game 6 to the Denver Nuggets in a blowout loss at home, which is honestly the only player that went to play that game was Cameron Payne. Everybody else was just really bad, really terrible, and Kevin Durant did not produce at all. Devin Booker was trying his best. He didn't produce at all. So with that in mind, it's a little bit difficult to scale how deep this team can make it in the playoffs, because Kevin Durant, as a Brooklyn Nets fan, he has not done anything in the postseason without Golden State. So how is he going to fare with this Phoenix Suns team? And that's sort of my worry going into the playoffs with Kevin Durant. I mean, obviously, as a Nets fan, I hope he loses, but then again, this lineup, it's heavily reliant on Kevin Durant scoring and Devin Booker and Bradley Beal remaining efficient and remaining healthy as well. So how is this going to play out in the postseason? Because, again, Kevin Durant has not done anything without Golden State, and I can't stress that enough. Let me know in the comments if you think I'm being a little bit too harsh on KD or if I'm not, but I personally think he hasn't done anything in the postseason without Golden State. I mean, he blew a 3-1 lead, so there's something, but I digress. And the most recent games that I'm actually going to include on this list are all blowouts, but I liked watching these games, and they definitely gave me a much better perspective on where each team was going. So the most recent game, obviously, was Golden State going against the Pacers. Now, I personally, while I am a LeBron fan, I am not going to deny Steph Curry's greatness, and I'm not going to say that he isn't fun to watch. Him shooting the ball in that game, it was a great matchup. It was phenomenal. His scoring, his three-point shooting, the best three-point shooter the league has ever seen. And while it might not have been a close game, it definitely helped me get an idea of where this Golden State team really is. Again, they're another team, I actually didn't mention this before, but they're another team that did not make any moves in the trade deadline. And a lot of people thought that it was time to move on from Clay and Draymond Green, but obviously, not obviously, in my personal opinion, I thought that Golden State was going to stick with the big three because of what they've done for that organization. And they did exactly that. So I have a feeling that all of those players, Draymond Green, Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson, they're not leaving. They're going to retire as Golden State Warriors because that's the right way to do it. I know the NBA is a business, but there comes a time where you have to just forget the business part entirely and just give those players, reward those players by retiring as a Golden State Warrior, given how much they've done for that franchise. And again, on the performance last night, Steph Curry, he made 11 threes. And these were difficult shots that he was making. These were really difficult three-pointers that he was making. And it was very fun to watch. It's always a great treat to watch Stephen Curry. Even as a LeBron fan, it's always great to watch Steph Curry. Halliburton wasn't really that good in this game. He still got 11 assists, though, but only 5 points. And again, big problem, the defense. There's no reason why Steph Curry should be left that wide open in any game. It doesn't matter what the score is. He should not be left wide open because he will absolutely kill you. And the Knicks, they played, kill you on the offensive end. Excuse me. The Knicks played, they matched up against the Mavs, as I mentioned previously. Luka also had a great game. He absolutely owned the Knicks. Again, not something that the Knicks should worry about, as I mentioned previously, but watching Luka Doncic play that game, that was a great game from him. He had this really, really cool behind-the-back pass that he threw to the paint and got him an assist. He was just on a completely different level, and there was nothing stopping him that game. It's always a treat to watch Luka play basketball. And another matchup was the Bucks going against the Wolves, as I mentioned previously. The Bucks need to hit that panic button. They need to figure out what the problem is, and they need to fix it now. I know it is difficult for Doc Rivers to adjust certain things, but regardless, they need to. They need to do that. They have to do that. Otherwise, this team is going to be bounced out the first round. In fact, I wouldn't even be surprised if they missed the playoffs at this rate. with how many games that they've been losing, and to the teams that they've been losing to, and the leads that they keep blowing, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up not making the playoffs. I really wouldn't. And it pains me to say that, because Giannis is a great power forward, and he's on the way of becoming, if he isn't already, a top 5 power forward that the NBA has ever seen. He's on his way there. So, and could arguably be top 3. But that's another conversation for another time. But they just can't win with Doc. They really can't. And bringing that new coach, getting rid of their old coach, terrible, terrible decision. Again, pardon me, I am parched. It is really difficult talking for an hour and however long this show usually lasts for. But it's as if Dame has never left Portland. And he still needs the help. I mean, granted, he does have the help now, but it's like they aren't doing well as a team. And the problem has been in their defense. Brook Lopez, I've said this before, Brook Lopez drops really low on the pick and roll. And that's sort of the strategy that they go with. And I understand it's like they have to make those threes, but with how talented a lot of offenses are, they're going to make those threes if you give them the open looks. So they can't really bank on the teams missing anymore. They have to actually defend, and it's a really difficult task when you have Damian Lillard in the starting lineup who can't defend. But I talk about the games that happen, and obviously this week isn't over, like I mentioned before, so let's talk about a matchup that I think will be the matchup of the week, which is the Lakers going up against the Pelicans. LeBron against Zion, LeBron versus Zion. I desperately want Zion to succeed in this league. There's a lot of jokes going around about like him being a little overweight and stuff like that. Stephen A. Smith said that he was eating the table, which was really funny. But I really want Zion to succeed. He is a freak athlete. Other than LeBron James and Giannis Antetokounmpo, he is one of the greatest finishers around the basket I have ever seen. Yes, even at that young age and even with his size, he is absolutely amazing, phenomenal player, and I have a feeling that this game is going to go back and forth between the King and Zion Williamson. And the Pelicans are also coming off of a win against the Clippers. They always own the Clippers. So with that in mind, they might come in with a lot more confidence because this LA team is a lot worse than that other LA team. But again, like, this would be a statement game for the Lakers, and they have LeBron. I would never put anything past LeBron. He has the tendency to will his team to win games. So with that in mind, I think it's going to go back and forth between Zion and LeBron. Definitely has the potential to be matchup of the week. This would be a statement game for the Lakers that they're here and they're ready to make noise for the postseason because, again, like I said, no trades were made. So this needs to be a big game that they win, given how they lost to the Denver Nuggets. But with that, we are out of time for this show. Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram for more content updates. And again, before I begin this segment, I'd like to remind all of you, please, to tip and to donate to get your comments recognized. Put your comments directly above on the screen. That is gsmcsportsnetwork.com/tip. Helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself, the host, you guys, the viewers. Once again, the link is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork.com/tip. It is displayed below every single ticker of the show segment as well as in the description below. And with that, I am your host, Nelson, and thank you once again for tuning in. Have a wonderful day, and as always, take care.